January 22nd, 2011. Mary Alice is here. Yeah, the subject you want to talk about, which was abortion. Before we started this show, we had a heated debate in there. Carlton Berkeley, please tell us what you want to talk about.
Okay, briefly, there have been several conversations that have been ongoing and seem to have been escalated since Republicans have taken control of Congress. But even on the local level and on the state level, the question of whether or not females should have access to abortion or contraception of any form has been a topic of conversation. Just this week, newly retired Bronx Assemblyman Michael Benjamin wrote an op-ed that was published in the New York Post. And basically, he is lamenting the numbers of abortions that take place in New York City. On the one hand, anybody could say that one abortion is one too many. That's true. We want abortions to be rare. That's true. But there are circumstances in which an abortion, I believe, should be an option for a female. In this op-ed, Michael Benjamin actually brings up the number of black women who have abortions, because by rate among our race, we have the highest rate of abortions, but by number of abortions, especially if you look nationally, it's still white women, white females who have the most abortion by number.
Okay.
It's just by percentage within the black community, we have the most abortions. So,
Highest rate.
the highest rate. So let's go back. Benjamin is responding to the New York City Department of Health's annual vital statistics report. The NYCDOH just put out their report for 2009. The births, the deaths, what happens, those basic statistics in the city. In New York City last year, there were 225,000 pregnancies. Of that, 125,000, a little more than that, were live births. 11,000 of those were spontaneous abortions, meaning miscarriages, and 87,000 were induced terminations or abortions. So there's a big uproar. The Archbishop, Catholic Archbishop for New York City, actually, Timothy Dolan, he actually had a press conference, and he said that for the first time he felt ashamed of being in New York when he saw the abortion rates. He decided to offer the Catholic communities or the Catholic religions services to help any woman that is conflicted about being pregnant and not knowing where to turn and what to do about taking care of this potential baby that she might have. So they offered Catholic charities and they offered their little services, which women in New York who pay attention are grateful for the offer, but it's not enough. For those who feel that they do not have the resources to adequately, they're alone, and they feel that they do not have the adequate resources to comfortably bring a child into this world that would be safe, healthy, with a roof over their head, well-fed, access to medical care, access to good schooling. If that mother feels that she's unmarried and she has no supports and she was abandoned and she doesn't feel strong enough to do this by herself, having the Catholic charities available for her to beg for handouts is not enough. In New York City, there are 36,000 children that sleep in shelters every night. Okay. So women know that the Catholic religion, as nice as it is, if they want to take care of children, they could start by getting some of those 36,000 children out of shelters. No woman is going to want to, in her right mind, bring more children in this world to have them live in a shelter.
Okay, so now you wrote an article.
I responded. I've been responding to this quite a while because one of Michael Benjamin's, to be fair, he has voted for a funding, Medicaid funding for contraceptive services of a wide variety. I'll say that.
Okay.
As during his tenure in the assembly, he has voted progressive things for women, whether they want contraception, whether they want to have a live birth. Fair enough. He draws the line at emergency contraception for teenagers. He says that emergency contraception, which is not abortion, emergency contraception is a pill or a series of pills that the female would take
after.
within the first few days of them even suspecting that they might ultimately have a pregnancy because they had unprotected sex, whatever the circumstance.
He's against that.
He's against minors having access to emergency contraception unless they have parental consent.
And your point was, because you made a good point.
Except in the cases, he says, except in the case of rape or incest. Now, there's a fundamental contradiction in that because, number one, we already have law on the books in this state. A minor cannot consent to having sex, even if they do.
Exactly.
We have statutory rape laws, Assemblyman Benjamin, that says that anyone under the age of 16 years old cannot consent to have sex. So if a person, especially adults, have sex with children, someone under 16,
that's a rape
and
charge.
Thank you. So every time a minor has sex with somebody, it's basically rape.
Anyway. Yes.
So that minor by default should have access to emergency contraception.
Unless it's another minor.
Unless
it's another minor.
Now, that's another issue too, because if a 14-year-old boy gets a 14-year-old girl pregnant and they think that their boyfriend and girlfriend, that little 14-year-old girl should not have access to emergency contraception? Come on now. What is the little 14-year-old girl going to do? Mm-hmm. What is the little 14-year-old boy going to do? We have that situation now. It's worse than that. I have written stories over the past few years in our Time Press that I had to pull up, and I put them on Room 8 this week, that outlined the type of situations that minors find themselves in, especially minor girls. Minor girls in New York City and across the country are preyed on by adult men from all sources. They're sexually abused. They're solicited into prostitution on the streets. They're subject to incest. They're men who prey on them as boyfriend and girlfriend when really the men are adults. Mm-hmm. If you'd be surprised how many children come to school pregnant and they're 12 years old in the 6th grade and look like this, like olive oil. And I have had gynecologists tell me that
let the people know you are a teacher.
I'm a substitute teacher, so I do get around and I see different things. I do not discuss the specifically what goes on in specific schools or specific children's situations because that's proprietary, confidential information. Mm-hmm. But I'm also a citizen of this city. I'm a resident of Brooklyn, and I get around and I observe. When I'm on the bus or the train or going to the laundromat or the supermarket, I watch what's going on around me. And I look at who is pushing the baby carriages. I look at the baby, I look at the mother, and then I look in the mother's face. And when I see that mother has the face of a juvenile, then I strike up conversations with them. How you doing? You know, your child is gorgeous. And sooner or later, I invariably ask, how old is the baby daddy? Invariably, these young children, these prepubescent teens tell me that the baby daddy was 52, 39, 47, 25. They're all adults for the most part. So we have adults preying on children, getting them pregnant and abandoning them. Because these adults are not interested in getting consent from the little girl's parents to marry the little girl and then raise the resulting child in a little white picket fence house happily ever after. What happens with these girls is that They're abandoned. They struggle to raise their children. They struggle to finish high school. I know a lot of women that come to me when they're at age 32. They have their child, their oldest child is 17. If you count back, that woman was sexually abused when she was 12 or 13.
Let's connect the dots in
The
terms
bottom
of
line is
abortions.
the bottom line is that there are situations where women and especially young girls want and need to have the right to terminate the pregnancy of that they might find themselves in if it's an unintended pregnancy, especially if that pregnancy is a result of sexual abuse, rape, solicitation into prostitution. The problem is so bad in Brooklyn with adult men having sex with little girls and soliciting them into commercial sex exploitation.
Prostitution.
Exactly. DA Hines just set up a sex trafficking unit right here for Brooklyn alone. The problem is so bad. And usually the people who get coerced into sexual commercial sex trafficking, prostitution, are little girls, 12, 13 years old. That's the same age of being at risk to get pregnant by a pimp, by some stray trick. And then the little girl is supposed to go tell their parent. If the little girl is under the control of a pimp, the relationship between the little girl and the parents, something happened to that a long time ago.
We agree. We definitely agree with
So
that.
the little girls should have the right to be able to, if they want to bring their child to term, and there's large numbers of children, even under the age of 15, who give birth in this city too. But if they want to give birth, that's an issue we need to talk about. If they want to terminate the pregnancy, that's an issue that they should have a right to be able to do also.
So we also need to look into what Charles Hines' website has a lot of good information.
I must say, D.A. Hines, he has come a long way. The way he runs his office. At one time, his office had a program where underage girls who were arrested for prostitution, they would be prosecuted. And the theory behind that, not just with him as a DA, but DAs throughout the boroughs and across the state and the country, the theory is that if a district attorney threatens the little prostitute with jail time, wants the little girl to give up the name of the pimp and tells the little girl, if you give up the name of the pimp, we won't prosecute you. But the little girl is so under the spell of the pimp, the little girl is not going to tell the name of the pimp. So what the DAs would do would be to prosecute the minor to the fullest extent of the law as if she were an adult prostitute. Now, New York State has enacted, the legislature enacted a law called Safe Harbor, and Governor Patterson signed it. It is not funded, but the essence of Safe Harbor is that children who are arrested or found to be prostituting and they're under the influence of a pimp of some sort,
exactly.
Those children are not treated as criminals. They're treated as victims under the law with access to all the attendant social services that would come with being a victim, as opposed to being a criminal.
But usually they're being beat on themselves, so they are a crime victim. But now that you did mention Governor Patterson, we're going to close this out with the governor. I see you also put some things down here in our time press, of course, with...
I put out a list of, I didn't even count how many accomplishments Governor David Patterson happened to achieve during his tenure as governor, a little over almost 3 years. The first thing Governor Patterson did when he found himself to be governor, when Eliot Spitzer had just stepped down, 1 week later, Governor Patterson actually worked with the legislature to complete a balanced budget for New York State on time. That was the first major accomplishment of Governor Patterson.
For New York, that's very important.
Exactly.
We just don't pass budgets on time in New York.
Exactly. Over the course of his tenure, Governor Patterson has signed many pieces of progressive legislation, so much so that the New York Civil Liberties Union said that Governor Patterson was probably the most productive for civil rights and civil liberties in decades in this state. There were several things he did. He signed the Gender Identity and Expression Executive Order so that people who have different gender expressions, usually that's a transgender person who may be transitioning from one sex to another and they're going through their psychological process, they should not be discriminated against. Governor Patterson signed the executive order. One of the biggest things he did with stimulus that the New York Post really railed him about was Governor Patterson actually gave $200 for each child of a household that was receiving food stamps.
Starting to go when it was time to go back to school.
Exactly. That was in August of 2009. And how he did that, what happened was Obama's stimulus package, each state had an opportunity, a set pot of money that they were able to distribute to people who were unlikely to benefit from the stimulus.
Okay.
But in order to distribute that pot of money, they had to get matching funds like 4 or 5 to 1. So I asked Governor Patterson what made him think of doing that $200 back to school stimulus for the low income families. And he said that he remembered, the struggles that his parents, although they worked, the struggles that his parents
going
had.
back to school.
So what he did was Governor Patterson called George Soros, billionaire hedge fund manager with liberal leanings. And George Soros gave him the matching funds in order to distribute that. And it didn't cost the taxpayers in New York State any dime.
We're going to have to, Derek has given us the signal, and he's given us the signal a while ago. We're going to have to wrap this up. Your article in Our Times Press, David Patterson.
His major administrative accomplishments. There are many. Just go and look at the list. And the ones that I have on OurTimePress.com, those are just highlights of some of the things that Governor David Patterson did. There is much more that this man did that he did not get credit for. He broke the deadlock with the Senate when he named Richard Ravitch his lieutenant governor. He did so many things for New York State that we did not pay attention to.
We're going to start it up on the show in give us a couple of days. We're going to be back here. And we're going to let you tell us what happened here. We got to close this out. This is it for us for this week, January 22nd, 2011. Be glad to have, I'm going to call her my co-host, Mary Alice Miller. We'll be back next week. We're going to finish up this topic with David.
And we'll have more for you because there's always something juicy going on in politics.
We're going to get
and it affects you.
We're going to get the former governor in here. I spoke to his people. He'll be here. Thank you. We're out of here. Have a nice day.